Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I recently replayed this game for perhaps the 5th or 6th time in my life. It's a favorite of mine from childhood, and every so often I get the urge to go back and give it another go. So I played it on the GameCube via the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. It was the first time I'd played it on that platform, and I had a fantastic time. I know this game's been talked about so much since it released, but I still think it's worth talking about today, especially in light of this recent announcement of a remake being in development. So I'd like to give my thoughts on the original. I'm going to assume if you're watching this that you've played it. That will save me the time it would take to recap the whole game. There will be a lot of spoilers in this discussion, so feel free to drop off if you'd like to play it before hearing me talk about it. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. Big surprise. A quick anecdote before I get into it. When I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, I had a friend across the street who had way more video games than I did, and among them he had a Nintendo 64 and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I used to go over to his house and watch him play. I might have taken turns with him sometimes, I'm not clear on that. A lot of what I remember is just running aimlessly around Hyrule Field as young Link. We weren't really sure what was going on, but we were really enjoying ourselves. Every time I'd come visit, he was somewhere else. He was in the Great Deku Tree one day, then Dodongo's Cavern, then Jabu Jabu's Belly, all of these incredible environments that really got my imagination going. I thought the premise of being a young kid with a fairy companion exploring a beautiful, wide-open world was just the best thing ever. Well, one day I come over and my friend is playing, and Link is an adult running through a total nightmare world. Hyrule is blanketed in darkness, and he's dodging attacks from ghoulish zombies and other terrifying creatures. Young Link's world was so bright and colorful and uplifting, and now I'm scared to even play this game anymore. I will never forget that mood shift. I didn't beat the game with my friend at the time, or at least I didn't witness him beat it, but I went back and played it for myself later, and the sudden gut punch of traveling forward in time and finding everything in ruins is still so powerful. So that was my experience with the game as a kid, and here I am many years later playing it over and over again. To this day, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time remains one of my favorite games. Not exactly a controversial take, given that this game is considered by many to be one of the greatest ever released, but I'd like to try to articulate my personal feelings about it. The reason I think that this game is still important, why many people still hold it as the best in the series, is because it has a beautiful spirit. I think a lot of people struggle to articulate that, but they feel it. I'll do my best to articulate why I think Ocarina of Time is a beautiful experience, why it has a beautiful spirit. First of all, the game does so much to endear you to the world and the characters. There are many times where other characters give you special gifts that open up new doors for you. There are times when characters stick with you through certain trials or challenges. There are times when characters put their faith in you to help them with something complicated. These are moments where characters place their trust in you, where you help them and they help you in return. It sounds so simple, but that time that you spend with them and those special favors that you do for each other are all really sweet and endearing. The game has you go on this grand, high-stakes adventure to fight evil, and there are characters who believe in you and do what they can to help you time and again. And even all the supporting characters are great. There are so many people who live this beautiful, calm, easygoing, pastoral life, and they even seem to invite you to live it with them. It's a way of life that you just want to help protect. The game also really provides a lot of space to use your imagination. The game is often very action-forward, a lot of interesting events happen in the story, and thankfully it doesn't over-explain them with dialogue. There are times when you are left to simply interpret facial expressions or body language during surprisingly deep scenes. There are times when you're given just a little bit of information about a character, but it gets you wondering what kind of background and motives they have. A little bit of detail can go a long way, and the game, maybe due to text limitations or technical constraints, is tastefully reserved in all the right areas. I'm coming to see this kind of restraint as something of a lost art in a lot of video games these days. As a player, I find it generally very enjoyable to experience the story and, from time to time, read between the lines with regard to what's happening. The sudden jump from a largely prosperous Hyrule to a ruined one raises so many questions, ones that you're bound to ask as you explore the fractured landscape, but it doesn't offer many concrete answers. Who are these shady characters cropping up in once peaceful areas, and have they been here all along? Are these zombies that are patrolling the streets of Hyrule Castletown the innocent people who were there before? What must Zelda's life have been like in the past 7 years for her to grow up and become this stealthy, magical warrior? Will defeating Ganondorf even fix all of this? I'm not saying the game always implies answers to these questions or even contains those answers anywhere at all, but I enjoy that the game encourages you to learn about its world by way of your own efforts instead of spelling everything out as plainly as possible. Both your physical exploration of the world and your mental curiosity for the world's lore and characters are rewarded surprisingly often, and I think that really helps give the player a strong sense of adventure throughout. The second part of the game's beautiful spirit is the score. The music everywhere is so beautiful, and it really helps the world feel more pure and more three-dimensional. The tone always feels spot on to me. At different times it's uplifting, it's relaxing, it's mysterious, at times it feels like coming home and hanging up your hat. At other times it feels like the dawn of a new day and a new adventure. At other times it feels like you're coming face to face with natural wonders or magical phenomena. It guides the experience so perfectly throughout. And even better, you play a part in scoring this experience. There are times when your music brings light to dark areas, so to speak. There are times when you play tunes just to see what they might do. Even if the tune in question does nothing in this situation, you might play it just to hear it in the setting you find yourself in. The songs you play remind you of other characters or locations that you miss, that aren't there anymore for you to visit, and you can decide to play them at any time. Thirdly, this game evokes such a variety of feelings. Young Link's quest to retrieve the 3 spiritual stones from the Kokiri Forest, Death Mountain, and Zora's Domain feels like a fairy tale in the best way. For the most part, in the midst of playing the game, it feels like a lighthearted adventure with colorful characters and many awe-inspiring locations. But there are hints that there is a really sinister force out there in the world, and this force dominates the future. The difference between the world young Link lives in and the one adult Link lives in is so stark. They feel like 2 different ways of seeing the world, and you just want to protect or bring back the beauty you've seen in it. When I'm playing, I remember Saria gave me the fairy ocarina here. I met Princess Zelda here. This place was so lively, and now it's a wasteland. But even when characters go away, even when places are destroyed, there's this sense of hope that pervades the experience. You may also marvel at all of the mystical workings of the great powers that watch over Hyrule, and the places that have existed long before you were here, and will be here long after you're gone. You may laugh from time to time at a bit of slapstick humor, or you may feel content when there's nothing to do and nowhere to be. You may feel creeped out, lonely, nostalgic, sad, wistful, exasperated, and much more. The game's title screen evokes emotions that I feel are central to the experience of playing the game. The melancholy feeling of being a lone adventurer in a wide-open world. The quiet peace that accompanies solitude. The contentment you might feel when you're able to just stop and take it all in. I appreciate that Ocarina of Time gives the player that kind of breathing room to contemplate the experience they've had. As I'm saying all of this, you may be thinking that there are other games and other adventures that run the gamut of emotions like this, but to me there's nothing else that's quite like Ocarina of Time. The way that it alternates between joyous exploration and hope for the future, and quiet melancholy and a longing for the happy past makes it so special. What other adventure games have moments that feel like these? As you can see, the game has a strong cinematic sensibility. The way that it frames certain scenes, the way that it backs out to show the full environment or zooms in to show character expressions, the way it portrays drama. I enjoy all of these story moments. I find them invariably entertaining and effective. I like that it calls my attention to characters or environments in ways that I wouldn't get otherwise if I were just seeing it from the over-the-shoulder third-person perspective. I also feel that they are few and far enough between to feel like rewards in between lengthy gameplay sessions and not like they overtake the playtime. Fourth, this game is really just an excellent adventure. Restoring peace to a fantasy world rarely feels this good. I know that some people might have issues with your fairy companion Navi offering hints or context throughout the experience, but the game doesn't offer an overbearing amount of hints, and it only very rarely wrests control away from you, so that for the most part, you're really free to explore new environments and think things through on your own. I don't think the game is perfect about this necessarily, although I don't claim to know what perfect would look like. But I love that I feel encouraged to try using all of my tools and songs and items in all sorts of situations, that I might be surprised by the results. Bombs can open up holes into underground caverns. Songs played in the right spots might have unexpected effects on the environment. The hookshot can get you up to some interesting spots. Trying on different masks and lenses can let you read the thoughts of humans and animals and find secrets hidden in all sorts of places. And I think it's a joy to go and talk to everyone in this game, to hear the music, to see the animations in the unique areas, and to explore everything else the game has to offer. It has so many unique things to interact with, it gives you so much freedom to do so, and it's all so fun and compelling. It isn't focused on being addicting, like completing a checklist or leveling up. It isn't focused on being repetitive, like doing hundreds of instances of the same objective over and over. It's an adventure in the sense that so much of it feels unique and often unexpected. That's what makes it such a great adventure to me. I would say that to sum up my thoughts on Ocarina of Time, I think it puts me in a wonderful frame of mind when I play it. Experiencing the story often feels like confronting some of the worldly evil and strife and mundanity that my eyes were gradually open to as I grew up, and fighting past all of that to reclaim the happy worldview of my youth. It never fails to be a colorful, exciting, and touching vision. I feel very lucky to have a game that I feel like this about, that I'm always happy to go back and play. Here's a little bonus segment for you. I actually replayed The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask recently as well. I chose to do so via the Nintendo Switch online service. A disclaimer, that game is not the focus of this video because playing Ocarina of Time continues to be one of my favorite experiences, and also because I played Majora's Mask with the help of save states, so I don't really count it as a proper playthrough. But Majora's Mask is really a whole different thing and not as much my speed. I've played through Majora's Mask about 3 times in my life now. The first time I played it was back in high school. For now, let me just try to comment on the spirit of Majora's Mask and compare it with Ocarina of Time. Spoilers for Majora's Mask ahead. As has been said many times over, Majora's Mask is a pretty dark game. I'll try to sum up the premise as a quick refresher. Young Link falls down a hole and is transported to a land called Termina. He learns that the world will end in 3 days when the moon, which has a terrifying face, crashes into Clocktown. The moon is being brought down by the power of Majora's Mask, which has possessed this little imp creature called Skull Kid, and you yourself have to wear a variety of masks to save the world, some of which turn you into other races: the Deku, the Goron, and the Zora. Every person in this world will die in 3 days, and they know it, and they all become increasingly terrified or melancholy or resigned as time passes. But Link can turn back the clock and start the 3-day cycle over again, and across numerous cycles he has to recruit the help of 4 giants to stop the moon and defeat Majora. So that's the premise. But how does it feel to experience? Personally, even though the games look and play so similarly, I thought it was a far cry from Ocarina of Time. I didn't find Majora's Mask to be very fun, and I don't think the game has a beautiful spirit per se in the same way. The game was developed in a year, making use of a lot of assets from Ocarina of Time, and to me that rushed development time feels pretty evident. While there is an effusion of ideas here, the Romani Ranch is getting attacked at night by aliens. Deku Scrubs are preparing to burn a monkey at the stake for kidnapping their princess. There is a grown man cosplaying as Link who flies around on balloons selling maps. The ideas just don't come together to make a world that I love. The setting, the characters, the soundtrack, the story, all of these just can't stack up against Ocarina of Time in my opinion. Also, the gameplay loop is very different. Unlike Ocarina of Time, there is much less of an incentive to really explore the world. Being on this time limit means every minute counts, and yes, you can slow down time to give yourself more breathing room. But if you screw something up, go to the wrong place, miss an event, dilly-dally too long, you have to reset and wait for those opportunities all over again. Playing through Majora's Mask casually takes me about as long as Ocarina of Time, I'd say, but a lot of that is repeating the same things, seeing the same events and dialogue over and over. So you might be exploring and have to stop in the middle because the 3-day cycle is ending, or you might think about exploring somewhere but decide against it because you're too late in the cycle. Whereas in Ocarina of Time, you just take your time talking to everyone, seeing everything, contemplating and exploring at your own pace. Majora's Mask feels like it is about efficiency. You should probably be warping places to save time. You should probably not be doing pointless tasks. You need to do the right things at the right times. Otherwise, you're wasting time in real life because you'll need to reset the 3-day cycle. If you sit still for too long, no matter what, soon it's game over. There's less of an incentive to stop and smell the roses, so to speak. Majora's Mask, particularly its central hub Clocktown, is fixated on a lot of the more mundane aspects of existence. Things like going through the motions of your daily routine, dreading your job or your dull life, keeping busy to stave off existential dread or any of life's big questions. That's what the atmosphere of Clocktown feels like, and you spend a great deal of time here, perhaps as much as half of the game, doing and redoing the same tasks over and over. When the end approaches, the tone gets very bleak. But none of this strikes me as very fantastic or adventurous. Oftentimes, this game doesn't feel like you're living out a legend, and aside from one early cutscene, it also never makes any mention of Zelda. It's certainly a unique game, but the concept and experience are wildly different than Ocarina of Time, and I prefer the latter by far. The fusion of the series' high fantasy adventure roots with repetitive routine and existential ennui just does not work for me here, on paper or in execution. The ideas don't mesh well, like they pull in opposite directions. In Ocarina of Time, seeing the beauty of Hyrule and coming to love it before seeing it fall to darkness in the future really affects me. In Majora's Mask, the world feels so bleak, uncanny, and frankly wacky throughout that I have trouble connecting to it. It's the difference between two moods, an earnest love for life and adventure, and a whimsical kind of melancholy. Neither mood is inherently better or worse, I just think Ocarina of Time really inspires me, really gives me pause and makes me love being alive. A quick note on save states too while I'm at it. While I think emulation and preserving old games is great, I think save states, the capability to save and reload your game at any second of play, really poison the experience of connecting with a game. For better or for worse, games are already designed with checkpoints and save systems in mind. Being able to override them so that at any point I never have to make any kind of mistake that sets me back is a bad thing. I'm not experiencing aspects of the game that the developers wanted me to experience. The tension of being forced to try my best, the despair of being set back quite a ways, the joy of finally succeeding after numerous attempts. If I play games with save states, I find every game starts to become a samey experience in my head because I never really feel disappointed, and I also never really feel satisfied. I'm just going through the motions to see the credits roll. Of course, if you're just playing casually, if it's just meant to be a fun diversion, that's understandable. But I would recommend to anyone that wants to connect with a particular game that you play it without save states or even walkthroughs. I played Majora's Mask with access to save states because I played it on the Nintendo Switch Online service, and I used them at parts where I stood to lose a lot of time or progress, but I really need to do myself a favor and replay it on original hardware for what I feel will be the authentic experience, with all of the intended tediousness and setbacks. Who knows, I may like the game even less that way, or maybe all the added time I spend in the game will endear me more to the world. But either way, I feel it will be a more authentic and satisfying experience. Alright, well, I didn't anticipate adding another section to this video, but I figured I'd kind of address it here and now since it's certainly topical. We have this The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake with a release that is fast approaching. Now, I'm sorry to say, but the prospect of remaking classic games is not an exciting one to me. I don't know that I could really name a game that was remade that I prefer to the original, and you may think that sounds ridiculous, but I've thought about it and it's true. Even some of the higher profile remakes out there, any of the Pokemon or Fire Emblem remakes, the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, and so on, are not games that I view as simply definitively better than their original counterparts. When it's announced that a classic game is getting a high-budget remake, the more revered the original is, the less interested I tend to be. The reason they're resurfacing something so revered in the first place is clearly for brand recognition, which they hope will translate to more sales of the remake. But if it's a true classic, a landmark of the gaming medium, then chances are there isn't a whole lot to improve upon, and conversely there is so much that could go wrong. The primary focus of most remakes is often rendering the source material more visually appealing, but I don't even consider these visual overhauls to be objective improvements. Overhauled character models or environments can easily end up being mismatched to the look of the original, and the effect can be uncanny or just completely off base. As far as visual improvements go, the closest thing in my mind to an objective visual improvement would be running the exact original game in question at a higher frame rate and an upscaled resolution. But there is still something to be said for the game feel of the original. I play retro games on original hardware all the time, and I enjoy the pace and fidelity of those games. I fall right back into playing them. To alter the original game's performance at all, I would argue, is to alter the original experience, and people will have their preferences on which they'd rather play. Some people prefer the distinctive crackle and hiss of their old personal records or cassette tapes to the pristine digital audio files they could be listening to. This focus on presentation in high-budget remakes, higher fidelity character models, textures, voices, music, and so on, often fails to capture, and even sometimes runs contrary to, the spirit of the original work. Would The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time really be better if it added, say, voice acting for all of the dialogue featured in the game? Would the original soundtrack be improved if it were performed with real instruments instead of being produced with synthesizers and samples? Would the story be more enjoyable if all of the characters and environments were visually on par with the look of, say, the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy? My answer to all of those questions is no. None of those things would make the original game better. It would just mean creating a different experience in a much more expensive game. Sure, you could insert voice acting for all of the game's dialogue, but there are benefits to using your imagination to hear those voices in your head, to decide for yourself what the people of Hyrule sound like, and voice acting would just rob you of that privilege. Remaking the soundtrack, whether that be with real or new instruments or by producing higher fidelity audio files or what have you, would risk robbing the game of the unique and cohesive sound it originally pioneered under technical constraints. The characters could look like they walked right out of the Final Fantasy VII Remake games, but I enjoy the original characters and world. To me, they suit that story, and those specific visuals and cinematics are a crucial part of the experience. To expound on this last example a little, some ideas work better in an abstracted style than others. I can imagine the silliness of certain situations in just about any way I want when they're happening from a bird's eye view between blocky little characters in Final Fantasy VII, for example. But when they're scaled up to normal proportions and photoreal resolutions, the situations might just not land anymore if any part of it feels off. Sometimes the original situation is cartoony, but the remake's visual portrayal of that situation is realistic, and those can clash. What these high-budget, high-fidelity remakes really do is leave less and less room for your imagination to factor into the experience of playing the game. Many old games, due to technical limitations, were highly abstracted. I'm looking at a small character in a diorama-style world. It's a representation of an environment which I can picture and flesh out in my head. Characters don't really look this blocky and polygonal, but their colors and features suggest forms which you might mentally elaborate upon. This is often part of the joy of the experience, just as it is with reading a good story or listening to good music. You are invited to participate in this fantasy to some extent. What does this scene look like in my head? What detail can I infer or supply that enriches my own experience? The more that the game puts forward as the real high-fidelity experience, the less you, the player, can imagine or provide yourself. I can't argue with the voices, the true-to-life character models, the high-quality environments. That's just what the game is, and if there are parts I don't like or never imagined being that way, that's too bad, it's set in stone. It's fun to be invited to use your imagination, and the more you are forced to relinquish that, the more the game needs to be subjectively perfect to you in all of the minute details to succeed. All of this is to say, I invite low fidelity, I invite style, I invite abstraction in the games I play. I don't need Ocarina of Time or any other classic game to be remade to look closer to photoreal, or have a soundtrack that sounds closer to a grand orchestra. I like that the original feels like it has its own identity, and also does not, or cannot, codify the audio and visuals at such a granular level that there are no gaps for me to fill in with my own imagination. Also, if artists did not nowadays have to be developing games at this granular level, and if they weren't being put on remake projects so often, we would be getting much more imaginative and original games much more frequently. Another thing about remakes that's brought up often is that mechanical shortcomings of the original can be fixed in a remake. For the Ocarina of Time remake, I've seen some comments saying the original feels clunky and terrible to play, and they hope that the new game offers all sorts of quality of life improvements, button mapping options, camera fixes, and so on. Perhaps the remake will suit these people well, but I would say that I find the original remains more than playable today. It's still thoroughly enjoyable. If you're feeling any friction with the game, stick with it, because it really does reward you in spades. I think I've belabored the point enough. Most of the time I view remakes of highly celebrated source material as misguided efforts at best, and cynical cash grabs at worst. Even Ocarina of Time 3D, a remake which in many ways stuck exceptionally close to its source material, is something I just can't get into simply because too much is different about an experience which I already found so pure and magical. When a game undergoes a remake, particularly a beloved but nevertheless old and dodgy looking game from a while ago, some people may go into it thinking there is hardly anything to be lost and everything to be gained. But I think almost the exact opposite about games like Ocarina of Time, or Final Fantasy VII, or Resident Evil 4, things like that. Anytime classics like these are tampered with, it's really so easy for the beautiful spirit of these games to get lost amid the chasing of current AAA trends, the commitment to arbitrary standards of high fidelity, the dumbing down of gameplay to court the widest possible audience, the metatextual meddling in the story to fix perceived faults or blemishes, or whatever else. Ocarina of Time and other classic games aren't perfect, but many of us had perfect experiences with such games. And for games like that, I prefer to stick to playing the originals instead of their remakes. I don't anticipate the Ocarina of Time remake, or really any other game for that matter, will make me feel anytime soon like the original does. Thank you very much for watching. I had the idea for this show recently when I realized that a lot of media reviews spend a lot of time explaining the subject matter or the logic of the work in question, and not a lot of time on how it impacted the reviewer personally. And everyone will have a unique experience with the work in question, and I always like hearing what others' experiences are, so I thought I'd put mine out there, not in the form of a review, but just in the form of my organized thoughts. Beyond that, I wanted a format that lets me veer off into tangents on related topics. You'll notice I did a little bit of that in this video, and just get at whatever my experiences have me thinking about or feeling at a given time. So these videos will also end up being a kind of scrapbook for me to look back on later. Lastly, I just want to put myself out there more anyway. I've done a lot of creative work that's never seen the light of day, so I'll aim to make more videos like this soon. Most videos will probably focus on books I read, games I play, music I listen to, but who knows? I'm not going to limit myself on what we talk about here. I might even revisit a topic again in the future if I feel I have more to say about it. I'm not fooling myself into thinking I've closed the book on something forever just because I've finished a script on it. Specific topics I will most likely be producing videos for soon are my thoughts on Fire Emblem, my thoughts on Final Fantasy, probably at least the 8th game in the series, that's my favorite, my thoughts on Dark Souls, and then perhaps any books I happen to read that I really enjoy, or any that are some of my all-time favorites. If any of that sounds interesting to you, feel free to subscribe and join me for future videos. Anyway, let me know if you like this, feel free to like and comment if you have any thoughts, and I'll see you later. Thanks.